Marcus Delaney slammed the brakes so hard the steering wheel nearly broke his wrists. The truck spun, tires screaming against black ice, and stopped 15 feet from a child standing barefoot in the middle of Highway 87. A little girl, 5 years old, no shoes, no coat, blood pooling under her feet and freezing into the snow. He didn't think. He ran. He grabbed her. She weighed nothing, less than his rifle pack in Kandahar. She whispered 5 words that would change his life forever. "I can't find my mommy." He didn't know her name. He didn't know she was worth $10 million. And he had no idea that saving her would put a target on his back. And on his son's. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Let me see how far this story travels. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. Marcus Delaney had driven this highway 1,000 times. Highway 87 through central Montana. Nothing but open land, barbed wire fences, and skies so big it made you feel like God was watching. He knew every curve, every pothole, every mile marker between Billings and Pine Ridge. He could drive it blind. Tonight, he almost had to. The blizzard had come in fast and mean, the kind Montana threw at you when it wanted to remind you who was boss. Visibility dropped to nothing. His old Chevy pickup shuddered against the wind, wipers slapping uselessly at the wall of white pouring across the windshield. Marcus gripped the wheel with both hands and leaned forward, squinting. He'd picked up transmission parts from a salvage yard in Billings, a side job that paid an extra $200, money he needed for Noah's new winter boots. His son had outgrown the last pair in 3 months. 7 years old and growing like a weed. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. A text from Mrs. Henderson, his neighbor. "Eli's asleep, had 2 bowls of mac and cheese. Don't rush home, roads look terrible." Marcus smiled. That boy could eat his weight in mac and cheese. He'd be fine at Mrs. Henderson's tonight. The old woman spoiled Eli rotten. Cookies, cartoons, staying up past bedtime. She'd lost her own husband 3 years back, and having Eli around lit her up. It was good for both of them. Marcus relaxed his grip on the wheel, just slightly, and let his mind drift to tomorrow. Saturday. No work. He'd promised Eli they'd build a snow fort if the storm left enough behind. Maybe make pancakes first. Eli liked when Marcus let him crack the eggs, even though half the shell ended up in the batter every time. That's when he saw it. A shape in the headlights. Small. Still. Standing dead center in the highway, like it had been planted there. Marcus's brain said shadow. His gut said child. His foot hit the brake. The truck locked up instantly, tires grabbing at nothing, the back end swinging wide on the ice. Marcus cranked the wheel left. The Chevy fishtailed, slid sideways, and came to rest with the engine ticking and his heart trying to punch through his rib cage. 15 feet. That's how close he'd come. He sat there for 3 seconds, hands shaking, breath coming in short bursts. Then something older than fear took over. The same thing that had kept him alive through 2 tours in Afghanistan, through firefights in the Korengal Valley, through nights so bad he'd stopped counting the dead. Move. Now. Marcus threw open the door and hit the ground running. The wind slammed into him like a linebacker. Snow driving into his eyes, his mouth, filling his lungs with cold so sharp it burned. He pushed through it, boots crunching through 6 inches of fresh powder, arms pumping. And then he reached her. A little girl, 5 years old maybe. Blonde hair matted with ice, plastered to her skull. She wore a thin pink nightgown. No coat, no hat, no gloves. Her skin had gone a color Marcus had seen before, in the mountains outside Kandahar, on soldiers who'd been left in the cold too long. Bluish white. The color right before the body starts shutting down. But it was her feet that nearly dropped him to his knees. Bare. Cut to ribbons. Blood seeping into the snow in small red circles that the blizzard buried almost instantly. She was clutching a teddy bear, one eye missing, stuffing leaking from a torn seam. She held it against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. "Hey there, sweetheart." Marcus dropped to one knee, keeping his voice low and soft. The same voice he used with Eli after a nightmare. "My name is Marcus. Can you hear me?" Her eyes moved to his face. Brown eyes. Huge. Glassy. The kind of eyes that had seen too much and understood too little. Her lips moved, but nothing came out. Just a tiny cloud of vapor that the wind snatched away. "I'm going to pick you up now, okay? We need to get you warm." He didn't wait for an answer. Hypothermia didn't negotiate. Marcus scooped her up, and she weighed almost nothing. 60 pounds, maybe less. Bird bones wrapped in frozen skin. She didn't fight, didn't cry. Just let her head fall against his shoulder and held that torn bear tighter. Marcus ran back to the truck. He yanked open the passenger door, climbed in with her still in his arms, and slammed it shut against the storm. He cranked the heat to maximum, reached behind the seat for the emergency blanket, army surplus, the good kind, and wrapped it around her small body twice. "You're safe now," he said, rubbing her arms through the blanket, trying to push warmth into her. "I've got you. You're safe." Her lips moved again. This time, sound came out, barely. A whisper so cracked and raw it sounded like paper tearing. "I can't find my mommy." Those 5 words hit Marcus harder than any bullet ever had. He'd been shot at in Helmand Province. He'd carried his best friend's body to an evac chopper. He'd buried his wife. But nothing compared to the sound of a child asking for help and not knowing if help existed. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Sophie." Sophie. That's a beautiful name. "Sophie, I need to look at your feet, okay? I'll be real gentle, I promise." She nodded, barely. Marcus unwrapped the blanket from her lower half. Her feet were worse than he'd thought. Deep lacerations, rocks or ice, maybe both. Frostbite already setting into the toes, the skin waxy and hard. He'd seen this in Afghanistan. It wasn't critical yet, but the clock was ticking fast. He grabbed his water bottle and a clean shop rag from the glove box. The water was barely above freezing, but he wet the rag and cleaned the worst of the blood and grit as gently as he could. Sophie whimpered but didn't pull away. Tough kid. Tougher than most soldiers he'd known. "You're doing great," Marcus told her. "So brave." "My son Eli. He's about your age. He's brave like you." "I'm 5, Sophie whispered. "Almost 6. Eli just turned 7. I bet you two would be friends." He wrapped her feet in the cleanest part of the blanket, then reached for his phone. The screen glowed, but the signal bar was empty. Dead. The storm had knocked out everything. "Sophie, do you remember how you got here? Where your mommy is?" Her face crumpled. The tears came slow at first, then fast, spilling down her cheeks in hot streaks that cut through the grime on her skin. "Miss Clara said we had to go. She said bad people were coming. We drove and drove, and then she told me to hide." Marcus went still. "Hide where?" "In the trees. She said don't come out. She said don't come out no matter what." And then what happened? Sophie's whole body shook. "She didn't come back. I waited like she said. I waited so long." But she didn't come back. and I got cold, and I couldn't find the car anymore, and I walked and walked and, hey, hey. Marcus pulled her close. She buried her face in his chest. You did the right thing. You were so smart. You kept moving. You kept yourself alive. That's what brave people do. I want my mommy, Sophie sobbed. I know, sweetheart. We're going to find her. I promise. It was a promise he had no right to make, but Marcus Delaney had never been able to watch a child cry and say nothing. He put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. The storm still raged, but Marcus had driven through worse in convoys through the Hindu Kush. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other on Sophie, keeping her steady, keeping her conscious. Tell me about your mommy, he said. She's pretty, Sophie murmured. She works a lot, lots of meetings, but sometimes she reads to me. I like when she does the voices. What kind of books? Princess books and animals. I like the one about the elephant who can't sleep. Eli likes dinosaur books. He wants to be a paleontologist. What's that? Someone who digs up dinosaur bones. That's cool. Normal. She sounded so normal. A 5-year-old girl who liked princess books and had a mom who worked too much. Nothing about her suggested the nightmare scenario building in Marcus's head. Where do you live, Sophie? Seattle, in a tall building. You can see the water from my window. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. Seattle. That was 600 miles from here. 600 miles of mountains, wilderness, and nothing. How had a nanny driven a 5-year-old that far? And why? Do you remember leaving Seattle? When did you leave? Sophie's eyes were drifting shut. The warmth was pulling her under. Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. Stay with me, Sophie. When did you leave Seattle? Dark time, she whispered. Miss Clara woke me up when it was still dark. She was crying. She said we had to go right now. Did she say why? She said bad people were coming. She said she had to keep me safe. Marcus's jaw clenched. His military training was cycling through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Kidnapping, custody dispute, trafficking, witness protection gone wrong. Every scenario pointed to the same conclusion. Sophie had been caught in the middle of something far bigger than a 5-year-old should ever have to carry. You did everything right, Marcus told her. Everything. You hear me? But Sophie was fading. Her shivering had slowed, which was bad. In hypothermia, the body stops shivering when it starts giving up. Her words came thicker, slower, edges melting into each other. I'm sleepy. I know, sweetheart, but I need you to stay awake just a little longer. We're almost there. Tell me about this castle you like to draw. Has a tower, Sophie mumbled. For the princess. I drew one for Mommy's birthday. Marcus talked faster. He told her about Eli, about the pancakes they made on Saturdays, about the time Eli tried to give the dog a bath and flooded the bathroom. He talked about anything and everything, just to keep that small voice answering him. Pine Ridge appeared through the snow like a ghost. Population 800 on a good day. One stoplight, one general store, one bar, and a sheriff's office that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1985. But right now, it was the most beautiful sight Marcus had ever seen. He pulled up in front of the sheriff's office, killed the engine, and gathered Sophie into his arms, blanket and all. She was barely conscious, her head lolling against his shoulder. He kicked the truck door shut and ran through the storm to the front entrance. The door swung open, and warmth hit them like a wall. Deputy Rawlings looked up from his desk, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. His eyes went wide. "Jesus, where'd you find her?" "Highway 87, 40 miles out, standing in the middle of the road. Barefoot." Rawlings was already reaching for the phone. "Sheriff, we got a situation." Sheriff Harding emerged from the back office. Big man, 50s, face like a catcher's mitt, weathered, suspicious, and not particularly friendly. His eyes swept the scene. Marcus, the child, the blood-spotted blanket. And there it was. That look. The one Marcus had been getting his whole life. The half-second pause. The calculation behind the eyes. Black man. White child. Middle of the night. Harding's gaze lingered 2 beats too long before his training caught up with his instincts. "Put her on the couch. Rawlings, get Doc Patel on the phone. Tell her it's an emergency." Marcus laid Sophie down carefully. She whimpered at the loss of his warmth and reached for him. He took her hand. "I'm right here, not going anywhere." Harding stepped closer, arms crossed. "You want to tell me what happened?" Marcus kept his voice even. He'd learned a long time ago that calm was the only currency that worked in rooms like this. "I was driving home from Billings, saw her standing in the highway. Picked her up. Drove here. That's it." "That's it. That's it, Sheriff." Harding studied him. Marcus met his gaze and held it. He'd stared down Taliban fighters. A small-town sheriff wasn't going to break him. "Name?" "Marcus Stalemate. I live on Ridgewater Road. Work at Miller's Auto Repair. My son Eli goes to Pine Ridge Elementary. Mrs. Henderson watches him when I work late. You can call any of them." Harding's jaw worked. Then he nodded. Not warmly, but enough. "What do you know about the girl?" "Her name's Sophie. She's 5. She's from Seattle. Her nanny, someone named Clara, drove her here 3 days ago. Told her bad people were coming. Left her in the woods and told her to hide. The nanny never came back." "Seattle?" Harding's eyebrows shot up. "That's 600 miles. "I know what it is. And the nanny just left a 5-year-old in a Montana blizzard?" "She told Sophie to hide. Something spooked her. Something bad." Harding turned to Rawlings. "Search missing persons, Seattle. 5-year-old girl, blonde, brown eyes. Name, Sophie. Last name unknown. Cross-reference with any open cases involving a woman named Clara." Dr. Patel arrived within 10 minutes. A no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd been Pine Ridge's only doctor for 2 decades. She took one look at Sophie and went straight to work. "Moderate hypothermia," she said, wrapping heated blankets around the girl. "Frostbite on 4 toes. Severe dehydration. Malnutrition. This child hasn't eaten properly in at least 2 days." She looked up at Marcus. "You found her when you did. Another hour out there, maybe 2. We wouldn't be talking about treatment. We'd be talking about a body." The weight of that settled into Marcus's chest like a stone. 1 hour. The margin between life and death, between a little girl going home and a little girl going into the ground. 1 hour, and one man who chose to stop his truck. Sophie was semi-conscious now, the heated blankets slowly pulling her back from the edge. Marcus sat beside the couch, still holding her hand. She'd grip tight every few minutes, like she was making sure he was real. "You got kids?" Dr. Patel asked him quietly. "A son, 7. "Then you know." She didn't have to finish the sentence. Yeah, he knew. Rawlings came back from his computer. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. Not a good sign from a man who carried a gun for a living. "Sheriff, you need to see this." "What is it?" "I didn't find a missing persons report matching her description, but I found something else." Rawlings held up his tablet, and his voice dropped. "Check the news." Harding took the tablet. Marcus watched the sheriff's face. He'd seen that expression before. on officers who'd just gotten intel that changed the entire operation. The color drained from Harding's skin. His jaw went tight. His eyes moved from the screen to Sophie and back again. "What?" Marcus demanded. Harding turned the tablet around. A professional photograph. A woman in her mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, power suit. The kind of confidence that came from knowing you owned the room and everyone in it. Beautiful in a sharp, deliberate way, like a weapon someone had polished. The headline hit Marcus like a freight train. Ashford Dynamics CEO Vivian Ashford offers $10 million reward for safe return of daughter. Marcus stared at the photo, then at Sophie, sleeping on the couch with her teddy bear, then back at the article. Sophie Ashford, Rawlings said quietly. Daughter of Vivian Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Dynamics. They build cybersecurity systems for governments. Companies valued at $14 billion. $14 billion. The number didn't even register. It was a fantasy number, the kind of money that existed in a world completely separate from Marcus's, where he counted every dollar and clipped coupons for groceries. Sophie went missing from the family's Seattle penthouse 3 days ago, Rawlings continued, along with her nanny, Clara Whitfield. The FBI is involved. They've been treating it as a kidnapping. And Clara? Marcus asked, though something in his gut already knew the answer. Rawlings swallowed. Clara Whitfield was found dead this morning, in a ravine off Highway 2, about 100 miles north of here. Silence. Cause of death? Harding asked. Single gunshot wound to the head. The room seemed to compress. Marcus looked at Sophie, this tiny girl who'd walked barefoot through a blizzard, whose nanny had loved her enough to die for her. Clara Whitfield hadn't kidnapped Sophie. She'd given her life trying to save her. Clara told Sophie to hide, Marcus said slowly. She knew someone was coming. She knew she wasn't going to make it, so she put Sophie somewhere they wouldn't find her, and she drew them away. That's one theory, Harding said carefully. It's not a theory. That girl told me Clara was crying. Told me Clara said bad people were coming. That's not a kidnapper, Sheriff. That's a woman protecting a child with the last thing she had, her own life. Harding held up a hand. I hear you, Walker, but I've got protocol. The FBI has an active case. The mother's offering $10 million. I have to make the call. Then make it, but keep Sophie here tonight. She needs rest. She needs medical care. And she needs to feel safe before someone puts her on a helicopter. Agreed, Dr. Patel said firmly. This child isn't going anywhere for at least 12 hours. Harding nodded. Rawlings, take the door. Doc, keep doing what you're doing. He looked at Marcus. You've done enough. Go home to your boy. Eli's safe at Mrs. Henderson's. I'm staying. Mr. Delaney, I'm staying, Sheriff. That little girl asked me not to leave. I'm not leaving. Something shifted in Harding's expression. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. The kind of respect one stubborn man gives another. Your call, Harding said, and disappeared into his office to make the calls that would bring the full weight of money, power, and federal authority crashing down on this tiny town. Marcus sat back down beside Sophie. She was sleeping now. Really sleeping. Not the dangerous unconsciousness of hypothermia, but the deep, healing rest of a body finally allowed to shut down in safety. He watched her breathe, in and out. Small chest rising and falling under the heated blankets. Somewhere out there, a billionaire was about to learn her daughter was alive. Somewhere out there, a dead woman lay in a ravine because she'd chosen a child's life over her own. And somewhere in this story was a truth that nobody was telling. A truth that had gotten Clara Whitfield killed and had sent a 5-year-old girl stumbling barefoot through a Montana blizzard. Marcus didn't know what that truth was. Not yet. But he knew one thing. The moment he'd stopped his truck on Highway 87, he'd stepped into something much bigger than a rescue. And there was no stepping back out. He held Sophie's hand and waited for whatever was coming. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the clock on the wall ticked past midnight. And 600 miles away, in a Seattle penthouse with a view of the water, a helicopter was already warming up. Sophie woke at 12 minutes past midnight. Marcus knew the exact time because he'd been watching the clock on the wall for 2 hours, counting the seconds between each tick, like he used to count rounds in a magazine. Old habit. The kind that never left you. He was half asleep in the chair beside the couch when he heard her gasp. A sharp, strangled sound, like someone had grabbed her throat. He was on his feet before his eyes fully opened. Combat reflexes. The body remembered what the mind tried to forget. Sophie's eyes were wide and wild, darting around the dim room. The sheriff's office was lit only by a desk lamp and the blue glow from Rawlings' computer screen near the door. Shadows everywhere. Strange walls. Strange smells. Strange sounds. For a 5-year-old who'd spent 3 days running, waking up in the dark meant only one thing. Hey! Hey! Marcus knelt beside the couch, hands open where she could see them. It's me. Marcus, remember? I found you on the highway. You're safe. Recognition came slow. Her breathing was ragged, chest heaving. Then her eyes focused on his face, and something in her loosened. Not all the way. She was too far gone for that. But enough. Where's Miss Clara? Marcus had known this question was coming. He'd been rehearsing answers in his head for 2 hours, and every single one of them felt like a lie. Because the truth was that Clara Whitfield was lying on a metal table in a morgue somewhere with a bullet hole in her skull. And this little girl loved her. And there was no combination of words in the English language that could make that okay. Miss Clara had to go away, he said carefully. But she made sure you were safe first. That was the most important thing to her, making sure you were okay. Sophie's chin trembled. Is she coming back? Marcus felt something crack in his chest, a fracture line running straight through the center of him. He thought about Eli asking the same kind of question 2 years ago, standing in the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas. When's Mommy coming home, Daddy? When's Mommy coming home? Miss Clara loved you very much, Marcus said. She loved you more than anything. It wasn't an answer. Sophie knew it wasn't an answer. 5-year-olds understood more than adults gave them credit for. But she didn't push. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she already knew, somewhere deep in that part of the brain that understood things before words could catch up. I want my mommy, she whispered. I know, sweetheart. Your mommy is looking for you. She's been looking for you since the minute you were gone. She's going to be so happy to know you're safe. Promise? I promise. Sophie reached out and grabbed his hand. Her fingers were so small they barely wrapped around 3 of his. She held on tight and didn't let go. Dr. Patel appeared from the back room with a cup of warm broth. She moved quietly, the way people do around wounded things. Let's get some food in you, honey. I bet your tummy's been complaining. Sophie sat up slowly, wincing hard when her bandaged feet shifted under the blanket. Marcus helped prop pillows behind her back, while Dr. Patel held the cup to her lips. Sophie sipped, tentative at first, then faster as her body remembered what hunger felt like. Slow down, Dr. Patel said gently. Small sips. We don't want your stomach fighting back. While Sophie drank, Marcus stepped away and pulled out his phone. Signal was back. The storm must have eased enough for the tower to recover. He called Mrs. Henderson. "Eli's fine," she said before he could ask. "Sleeping like a log. Had a dream about dinosaurs and talked in his sleep for 20 minutes. Don't worry about a thing." "Thanks, Mrs. Henderson. I might not make it home tonight." "You do what you need to do. That boy is safe as houses with me." Marcus hung up and turned back to find Sophie watching him. "You have a little boy?" she asked. "Yeah. His name's Eli. He's 7. "Does he go to school?" "Second grade. He likes math. Hates spelling." "I like drawing," Sophie said. "Miss Clara says I'm good at it." Present tense. Like Clara was still alive. Like she'd walk through the door any minute and take Sophie home. "What do you like to draw?" "Animals and castles. I drew a castle for my mommy's birthday. It had a tower for the princess." "I bet your mommy loved that." "She put it on the fridge." Sophie paused. "She works a lot. But she kept my drawing." There was something in the way she said it. Not complaining, not sad exactly, but aware. A 5-year-old who'd already learned that her mother's attention was something you earned, not something you could count on. Marcus knew kids like that. Hell, he'd been a kid like that. Rawlings brought over crackers and cheese from the break room. Simple food, but Sophie ate like it was Christmas dinner. When she finished, Dr. Patel checked her temperature and pulse. "She's warming up nicely," Dr. Patel said quietly to Marcus. "The frostbite isn't as severe as I initially feared. She'll keep all her toes. She'll heal." "Can I go home now?" Sophie asked. "Soon," Marcus said. "We're just waiting a little longer. Your mommy is on her way." Sheriff Harding emerged from his office and caught Marcus's eye. He jerked his head toward the hallway. Marcus gave Sophie's hand a squeeze and followed. Harding pulled the door half shut behind them and kept his voice low. "I spoke with the FBI. Agent named Carter. She's running the case out of Seattle. She confirmed everything. Sophie Ashford, daughter of Vivian Ashford. The nanny Clara Whitfield was the primary suspect in the kidnapping." "Clara wasn't a kidnapper." "That's not what the FBI thinks. They're calling it a kidnapping gone wrong. Theory is Clara was working with someone. The deal fell apart. She panicked and ran." "That's bull, and you know it." Harding's eyes narrowed. "What I know is that I've got a federal agency with 100 agents on this case, and you've got the word of a scared 5-year-old. I know which one carries more weight in a courtroom." "What about the mother? What did she say?" "She's airborne. Private helicopter out of Seattle. ETA about 45 minutes. In this storm? Storm's breaking up. And when you're worth $14 billion, weather is more of a suggestion than a rule." Marcus shook his head. "Something's wrong here, Sheriff. Clara didn't kidnap that girl. She was running from something. She was protecting Sophie." "Maybe, maybe not. Either way, it's the FBI's problem now. Our job is to keep the kid safe until her mother arrives. That's it." "And then what? We just hand her over and pretend everything's fine?" "We hand her over to her mother. That's what we do. That's what the law says we do." Harding stepped closer. "Listen to me, Stalemate. You did a good thing tonight. A real good thing. But this is bigger than you and me and this office. Vivian Ashford has more lawyers than we have people in this town. The FBI is handling it. Let them." Marcus wanted to argue. Every instinct he had, every hard lesson from Kandahar about trusting your gut when the intel didn't match the ground truth, screamed that they were missing something. But Harding wasn't wrong. There were rules. There was a system. You didn't hide a billionaire's child because you had a bad feeling. "Fine," Marcus said. "But But I'm here when the mother arrives. I want to look her in the eye." Harding studied him for a long moment. "Your call." They went back into the main room. Sophie had fallen asleep again, the teddy bear tucked under her chin. Dr. Patel sat nearby, reading a medical journal, one eye always on the child. Rawlings was at his post by the door, alert and uncomfortable in equal measure. Marcus sat down in his chair and waited. He thought about Clara Whitfield, a woman he'd never met, never would meet. A nanny who'd worked for the Ashford family for 4 years. 4 years of reading bedtime stories, packing school lunches, holding a little girl's hand when her mother was in meetings. You didn't do that for 4 years and then sell the kid for ransom. You just didn't. Unless you weren't selling her. Unless you were saving her. The helicopter arrived at 1:15 a.m. Marcus heard it first. That distinctive thump of rotors cutting through air, getting louder, closer. He'd spent enough time around Blackhawks to know the sound in his sleep. This wasn't military, though. The pitch was different, smoother, expensive. Rawlings went outside to guide them in. Sophie stirred at the noise but didn't wake. Dr. Patel had given her a mild sedative an hour ago. The child needed rest more than anything. "That's not FBI," Harding said from the window, watching the helicopter descend behind the building. "That's private." "The mother," Marcus said, "has to be." The aircraft touched down. Snow swirled in the rotor wash, a miniature blizzard born and dead in seconds. The door opened, and 3 figures climbed out. 2 men in dark suits. Security, obvious even from a distance. The way they moved, the way they scanned the perimeter before allowing the 3rd person to exit. Professional, trained, possibly former military. Between them walked a woman. Vivian Ashford looked nothing like the photograph in the news article. The polished CEO was gone. Her dark hair hung loose and tangled around her face. She wore jeans and a heavy coat thrown on over what looked like a sweater she'd grabbed without looking. No makeup, no jewelry, no armor. But it was her face that hit Marcus hardest. She looked destroyed. Eyes swollen from crying, skin gray with exhaustion, mouth set in a line so tight it might never open again. This wasn't a corporate titan. This wasn't a woman worth $14 billion. This was a mother who'd spent 72 hours believing her child was dead. The door burst open, and Vivienne rushed in. Her security stayed close, but she moved like they weren't there, like nothing existed except the room she was entering and whatever she'd find inside. Her eyes swept the space, frantic, desperate, terrified. She looked at Harding, at Rawlings, at Dr. Patel, at Marcus. Then she saw Sophie. The sound that came out of Vivian Ashford wasn't human. It was deeper than that, older than that. It was the sound a mother makes when the worst nightmare of her life suddenly reverses, when death gives something back. A sound that started in her chest and tore its way out through her throat and filled the room like a physical force. She ran to the couch, dropped to her knees. Her hands hovered over Sophie's body, shaking so badly she couldn't control them. Like she was afraid to touch her own daughter. Like Sophie might dissolve if she made contact. "Sophie," she whispered. "Oh God, Sophie." The sedative held Sophie under, but something got through. Some frequency that only mothers and daughters shared. Sophie's hand moved on the blanket, small fingers reaching, searching. Vivian caught that hand and pressed it to her lips, and her whole body folded in on itself as the sobs finally broke free. Marcus stepped back. So did everyone else. Harding moved to the far wall. Rawlings turned away. Dr. Patel found something fascinating on her clipboard. Nobody looked. Nobody spoke. This moment didn't belong to them. For 5 full minutes, Vivian Ashford knelt on the floor of a sheriff's office in Pine Ridge, Montana, holding her daughter's hand and crying with a force that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her body. Every wall she'd built, the CEO, the billionaire, the woman who commanded boardrooms and bent markets to her will, crumbled to dust. She was just a mother, just a woman who'd gotten her child back. Dr. Patel finally approached. "Miss Ashford, I'm Dr. Patel. Your daughter is going to be fine. Mild hypothermia, some frostbite on her toes, dehydration. But she'll make a full recovery." Vivian looked up, tears still falling, no attempt to hide them. "Thank you. Thank you." Then her eyes found Marcus. They locked on him with an intensity that made the hair on his arms stand up. "You," she said. "You found her." "Yes, ma'am." Vivian stood, crossed the room in 3 strides, and before Marcus could react, she had her arms around him, pulling him into a hug so fierce he could feel her heartbeat through their coats. She was shaking, her whole body vibrating with the aftershock of 3 days of terror. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder. "Thank you for saving my baby. Thank you." Marcus stood there. He didn't know what to do with his hands, didn't know what to say. So he just let her hold on, because he understood. If it had been Eli out there, if someone had found Eli in a blizzard and kept him alive, Marcus would have hugged that person until his arms gave out. When Vivian finally pulled back, she wiped her eyes with the heels of her hands. "I'm sorry, I thought she was gone. I thought—" "I know," Marcus said. "I know." Harding stepped forward. "Miss Ashford, I understand you want to take your daughter home, but I need to ask a few questions about what happened." Vivian's face changed, fast, like a switch being thrown. The broken mother receded and something harder took her place, something practiced and controlled. "The FBI is handling the investigation, Sheriff. I've told them everything I know." "Clara Whitfield," Marcus said. The name landed in the room like a grenade. Vivian's jaw clenched. Her security men shifted. Subtle, trained movements, hands drifting toward their jackets. "Clara betrayed my trust," Vivian said. Her voice was steady now, cold. "She took my daughter. She tried to ransom her. The FBI has evidence." "That's not what Sophie told me." "Sophie is 5 years old. She was terrified and confused." "She was clear enough. She said Clara was crying. Said Clara told her bad people were coming. Said Clara told her to hide and not come out no matter what." "That's not a woman running a kidnapping, Miss Ashford. That's a woman trying to save a child's life." The silence that followed could have cut glass. One of the security men took a half step forward. Vivian raised a hand without looking at him, and he stopped. "You don't know what you're talking about," Vivian said quietly. "Clara had debts. She was desperate. The FBI found evidence of communication with known criminal contacts." "Or someone put that evidence there," Marcus said. "Someone with resources. Someone who wanted Clara's story to be the story." "That's enough." Vivian's voice turned to steel. Not anger, something colder. Authority. The voice of a woman who made decisions that moved markets and ended careers. "Mr. Delaney, I will be grateful to you for the rest of my life for what you did tonight. But you are a mechanic in a town I'd never heard of before today. You don't know Clara. You don't know my family. You don't know my company. And you do not know what happened." Marcus held her gaze. He'd stared down men with guns pointed at his face. He'd been interrogated by people whose job was breaking other people. Vivian Ashford was powerful, but she wasn't the scariest thing he'd ever faced. "A woman died protecting your daughter," he said. "Shot in the head. dumped in a ravine. She could have left Sophie anywhere, dropped her at a police station, a hospital, a firehouse. Instead, she drove 600 miles through the night to put as much distance as possible between your daughter and whatever she was running from. That's not desperation, Miss Ashford. That's love. And that's terror. Something flickered across Vivian's face, just for a second. A crack in the armor, so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. Then it was gone. "The world is more dangerous than it appears, Mr. Delaney," she said. "Especially for people like Sophie. People born into wealth and power. They become targets." Is that what Clara figured out? That Sophie was a target? Clara made mistakes. She got involved in things she didn't understand. It cost her life. Or she understood perfectly, and that's why she's dead. The room was so tense that Rawlings had his hand on his sidearm without seeming to realize it. Harding stood rigid, watching the exchange like a man watching two trains headed for the same track. Vivian took a slow breath. "I came here for my daughter, not for an interrogation." She turned to Harding. "Sheriff, I'd like to take Sophie home now." Dr. Patel stepped in. "She should stay under observation for at least another 12 hours. I'd recommend the hospital transfer." "No hospitals," Vivian said immediately. "I have a private medical team in Seattle, the best in the country. She'll be in their care within 3 hours." "In her condition, Doctor, my daughter has been through hell. She needs to be home, in her own bed, where she's safe." The way she said safe, pressing down on the word like she was trying to nail it to the floor, told Marcus everything he needed to know. Vivian wasn't just talking about warm blankets and locked doors. She was talking about control. About having Sophie back inside her world, behind her walls, where the story could be managed and the questions could be shut down. Sophie stirred on the couch. A small sound. Everyone turned. Her eyes opened, foggy, confused. Then she saw Vivian, and her whole face collapsed into something so raw and pure that Marcus had to look away. "Mommy." Vivian was at the couch in 2 steps. She gathered Sophie into her arms, carefully, gently, mindful of the bandaged feet, and held her the way you hold something you almost lost forever. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Mommy's here." "I was scared," Sophie whispered. I know, baby. But you're safe now. You're never going to be scared like that again. I promise." They held each other and cried, and Marcus sat in his chair with his hands in his lap and thought about Denise. About the last time he'd held her. About how you never know it's the last time until it's too late. When the tears slowed, Sophie looked around the room and found Marcus. "Mommy, that's Marcus. He found me. He carried me." Vivian's arm tightened around her daughter. "I know, baby." "Is he coming with us?" "No, sweetheart. Marcus has to stay here with his little boy. But maybe we can visit him sometime." Sophie's face fell. She reached out for Marcus, and he came to the couch and knelt beside her. "You don't have to thank me, Sophie. I'm just glad you're okay. You're going home now, back to your room, your drawings. Everything's going to be all right." "Will I see you again?" Marcus smiled. "Maybe. The world's a funny place. People run into each other when you least expect it." Sophie hugged him. Her arms barely made it around his neck. She held on with everything she had. This little girl who'd walked through a blizzard and survived, who'd lost her Clara and found a stranger in a truck and decided to trust him. "Thank you for finding me," she whispered. Marcus hugged her back. Careful, gentle, like holding a bird. "You take care of yourself, okay? And take care of your mom." "I will." Vivian's security men produced a thick blanket and wrapped Sophie for transport. Dr. Patel handed over medical instructions and supplies. Vivian turned to Harding. "Thank you, Sheriff. Your discretion is appreciated." Harding nodded. The meaning was clear. Don't talk to the press. Then Vivian turned to Marcus one last time. She reached into her coat and pulled out a card. "My private number. If you ever need anything, a job, medical care, schooling for your son, anything at all, you call me." Marcus took the card. "I don't need anything. I'm just glad Sophie's safe." Vivian studied his face. Whatever she was looking for, she seemed to find it. "You're a good man, Mr. Delaney." She paused. "I hope that's enough." She picked up her daughter and walked out with her security flanking them like a wall. The helicopter engines spun up, the rotors caught air, and the aircraft lifted off into the darkness. Marcus stood in the doorway and watched the lights climb until they were just another star in the clearing sky. Then even that was gone. Nothing left but the cold and the snow and the quiet. Harding came up beside him. "Well, that's that." Marcus said nothing. He was thinking about the way Vivian's face had cracked when he mentioned Clara, the way she'd shut it down, the way her security had moved toward their weapons, the way she'd said, "safe," like it was a fortress she was building with her bare hands. He was thinking about a dead nanny in a ravine, and the little girl who'd walked through a blizzard, and a mother who'd arrived in a helicopter and left with the truth locked behind her teeth. He was thinking that Sheriff Harding was wrong. This wasn't that. Not by a long shot. Marcus pulled the card from his pocket. Vivian Ashford, private. A phone number with a Seattle area code. He put it in his wallet, next to Agent Carter's card that didn't exist yet. Next to the photo of Eli he kept behind his driver's license. Next to the folded prayer card from Denise's funeral. Then he got in his truck and drove home through the breaking storm. And the whole way, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just handed a lamb back to someone who might be the wolf. 3 days passed. Marcus went back to work. He dropped Eli at school every morning at 7:45, clocked in at Miller's Auto Repair by 8:15, and spent his days elbow-deep in engines and transmissions. Oil changes, brake jobs. The kind of work that kept your hands busy and your mind occupied, which was exactly what Marcus needed, because every time his mind went idle, it drifted straight back to Highway 87. He kept seeing Sophie's feet, the blood in the snow. The way she'd whispered, "I can't find my mommy," like she was apologizing for being lost. He kept hearing Vivian Ashford's voice, that switch from shattered mother to steel executive, fast as a blade being drawn. And he kept thinking about Clara Whitfield, lying in a ravine with a bullet in her head, dead because she'd tried to do something right in a world that punished you for it. Marcus hadn't told anyone. Not Mrs. Henderson, not his co-workers, not Eli. What would he say? "I found a billionaire's kid in a blizzard, and I think her mother might be hiding something about the nanny who was murdered?" He'd sound crazy. He felt crazy. On Tuesday afternoon, he was under a Ford F-150, replacing a catalytic converter, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost let it ring. Almost. Something made him slide out from under the truck and answer. "Mr. Delaney." A woman's voice, tight, controlled, urgent. "This is FBI Special Agent Lorraine Carter. I need to speak with you about Sophie Ashford." Marcus sat up on the shop floor, wiping his hands on his jeans. His heart was already picking up speed. "Is Sophie okay?" "For now, but we need to talk, in person. Can you meet me at the Pine Ridge Sheriff's Office in 1 hour?" "What's this about?" "Not over the phone, Mr. Delaney. 1 hour. It's important." She hung up before he could push further. Marcus stood in the shop for a full minute, phone in his hand, oil on his fingers, thinking. Then he told his boss he had a family emergency, washed up, and drove to Pine Ridge. Agent Lorraine Carter was already in Sheriff Harding's office when Marcus arrived. She was mid-40s, lean, sharp-eyed, with close-cropped hair and the kind of focus that made you feel like you were being read like a book, whether you wanted to be or not. She wore a dark blazer over a white shirt. No jewelry, no nonsense. A woman who'd spent her career hunting people who didn't want to be found. Harding sat behind his desk. His expression was the careful blank of a man who'd been told something that changed the shape of the room. "Thank you for coming," Carter said, gesturing to the empty chair across from Harding's desk. "I know this is unusual." "Everything about the last 3 days has been unusual," Marcus said, sitting down. "What's going on?" Carter pulled a tablet from her bag and placed it on the desk between them. She didn't turn it on yet. "I need you to tell me everything Sophie said to you. Everything about Clara Whitfield, about what happened, about the night she was left on that highway. Every word you can remember." Marcus told her. All of it. Clara waking Sophie in the dark, the crying, the talk of bad people coming, the driving, the hiding, the promise to stay hidden no matter what, the waiting that turned into walking, that turned into a 5-year-old girl standing barefoot in a blizzard in the middle of nowhere. Carter listened without interrupting. She took notes on the small pad, with handwriting so tight and precise it looked like code. When Marcus finished, she set down her pen and sat back. "Mr. Delaney, what I'm about to tell you is part of an active federal investigation. It does not leave this room. Understood?" "Understood." "Sheriff?" Harding nodded. Carter turned on the tablet. A photograph appeared. Clara Whitfield, alive. Not a crime scene photo, but something from happier times. A woman in her early 30s, auburn hair, kind face, smiling at the camera with Sophie on her lap. They looked like family. "Clara Whitfield wasn't a kidnapper," Carter said. "She was a whistleblower." The words hit Marcus like a round to the chest plate. Not surprise, exactly. More like confirmation. The thing he'd known in his gut, finally given a name. "4 months ago," Carter continued, "Clara contacted our Seattle field office. She had information about Ashford Dynamics. Specifically, she claimed the company was engaged in the illegal sale of cybersecurity exploits to foreign governments. Backdoors built into their software. Access points that could compromise the infrastructure of any nation using their systems. We're talking power grids, banking systems, military communications, national security level threats." Marcus stared at her. "And you verified this?" "We were in the process. Clara was gathering evidence from inside the Ashford household, documents, recordings, communications she'd witnessed or overheard. 4 months of careful, dangerous work. She was building a case that would have been one of the biggest national security prosecutions in a decade." "What happened?" "Someone found out." Carter's voice dropped, not for dramatic effect, because what came next was the kind of thing you said quietly, the way you'd talk about a death in the family. "3 days before you found Sophie, Clara called me. It was 2 in the morning. She was panicking. She said people were coming. She said they knew about her. She said she had to get Sophie out." "Why Sophie?" Harding asked. "Why take the kid?" Carter looked at him. "Because Clara believed Sophie was in danger. She believed whoever had discovered her whistleblowing would use Sophie as leverage against Vivienne. Or they'd use Sophie to keep Vivienne in line. Or, worst case, they'd eliminate anyone who could become a liability, including a 5-year-old child." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You're saying someone would have killed that girl?" "I'm saying Clara believed it was possible. And Clara was not a paranoid person. She was methodical, careful, intelligent. If she was scared enough to run, she had good reason. "You told her to bring Sophie to a safe house," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. He could see it playing out. The phone call, the instructions, the desperate woman trying to follow a plan that was already falling apart. Carter nodded. "I had a safe house arranged outside Spokane. Clara was supposed to drive there directly. She never made it. Somewhere along the way, she realized she was being followed. She deviated from the route, drove south instead of east, ended up on Highway 2, heading into Montana. And they caught up to her. They caught up to her, but not before she hid Sophie." Carter paused. "Clara Whitfield drove 600 miles through the night with a 5-year-old girl in the back seat. When she realized she wasn't going to make it, she pulled off the road, took Sophie into the woods, and told her to hide. Then she got back in the car and kept driving. She drew them away. She gave Sophie a chance. And they killed her," Marcus said. "Single gunshot, close range, execution style. The car was found in a ravine off Highway 2. Clara was still in the driver's seat." The room was silent. Marcus could hear the clock ticking. He could hear Harding breathing. He could hear his own heartbeat. "What about the evidence she gathered?" Marcus asked. "Gone. Her phone was destroyed. Her laptop was missing. Whatever she'd collected over 4 months disappeared with her. So it's her word against Ashford Dynamics, and she's dead." "That's the situation." Marcus leaned forward. "What about Vivian? Does she know Clara was a whistleblower?" Carter chose her next words carefully. Vivian Ashford built Ashford Dynamics from nothing. Started in a garage apartment in Palo Alto. Coded the first security protocols herself. Grew the company into a $14 billion enterprise in under a decade. She's brilliant. She's aggressive. And she's been in the room for every major deal the company has made. That's not an answer. No, it's not. Carter met his eyes. I don't have enough to answer that question definitively. What I have is a dead whistleblower, missing evidence, and a company whose growth over the last 3 years has been, to use a technical term, impossible without outside help. Contracts with governments that don't do business with American companies. Access to markets that should have been closed. Revenue streams that don't match the product. You think Vivian knew what was being sold? I think Vivian either knew, authorized it, or deliberately looked the other way while someone in her organization sold access to half the world's infrastructure. Clara believed it was option 1. She believed Vivian was the architect. Marcus sat with that. He thought about the woman who'd knelt on the floor of this very office 3 days ago, sobbing, holding her daughter's hand. The woman who'd hugged him so hard he could feel her heart hammering. The woman who'd said, "Thank you for saving my baby," like she meant it with every cell in her body. And then he thought about the other Vivian, the one who'd shut down the second he mentioned Clara, the one whose security reached for their weapons when the questions got uncomfortable, the one who'd said, "The world is more dangerous than it appears," like she was speaking from personal experience. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. Carter closed the tablet. "Because you're in the middle of it now, Mr. Delaney. You spent hours with Sophie. You were present when Vivian retrieved her. You challenged Vivian directly, in front of her security, in front of witnesses. You questioned the official story." So if Vivian Ashford is what Clara believes she was, then she has resources you can't imagine. Money that buys silence. Connections that make problems disappear. Private security that operates outside any law you or I would recognize. Carter leaned forward. "Rachel Flynn tried to do the right thing, Mr. Delaney. She tried to protect a child and expose a crime. She ended up dead in a ravine with a bullet in her skull. Clara, Marcus corrected. Clara, sorry. Clara Whitfield. Carter caught herself. Clara tried to do the right thing, and now she's dead. You were there. You know things. You asked questions that made powerful people uncomfortable. In their world, that makes you a loose end. The words settled onto Marcus's shoulders like a weight he'd never be able to put down. He thought about Eli, 7 years old, already lost his mother, already had to learn what it meant when Daddy said, "Mommy's in heaven now." And heaven meant a hole in the ground and a headstone that Eli put flowers on every Sunday. "Are you telling me my son is in danger?" "I'm telling you to be careful. I'm telling you to be aware. I'm telling you that if anything unusual happens, anyone contacts you, anyone shows up asking questions, anything feels wrong, you call me immediately." She pulled a card from her jacket and slid it across the desk. "That's my direct line, day or night." Marcus picked up the card, held it between his fingers. Such a small thing, a rectangle of paper with a phone number on it. But it felt like a grenade. "And Sophie?" he said. "What happens to her?" Carter's expression softened for the first time since he'd walked in. The agent receded, and the person emerged. A woman who'd seen too many cases where the victims were children, and the perpetrators were the people who were supposed to protect them. "Sophie is caught in the middle of something she'll never understand," Carter said. "Her nanny loved her enough to die for her. Her mother is either a criminal or a victim, and right now we can't get close enough to determine which. So she just stays there, living with someone who might be using her? Until we have proof, our hands are tied. Vivian Ashford has an army of lawyers. I can't take a child from her mother based on the testimony of a dead whistleblower and the instincts of a mechanic from Pine Ridge, Montana, no matter how right those instincts might be." "Then get the proof." "That's what I'm trying to do. But Clara was my source. She's gone. The evidence is gone. Ashford Dynamics has had 3 days to scrub everything. We're starting from zero." Marcus stood up. He needed to move. Sitting still made him feel like the walls were closing in. He paced to the window and back. There has to be something. Clara was smart. You said so yourself. Methodical. She wouldn't have put all her eggs in one basket. Carter watched him pace. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that a woman careful enough to drive 600 miles to protect a 5-year-old girl was careful enough to hide a backup. Somewhere Vivian wouldn't think to look. Somewhere they wouldn't find even if they tore Clara's life apart. We searched her apartment, her storage unit, her bank accounts, her email, her cloud accounts, everything. You searched the obvious places. Clara wasn't being obvious. She was being invisible." Carter was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Did Sophie mention anything? Anything at all that seemed unusual? A place, a name, an object?" Marcus closed his eyes and went back to that night. The truck, the highway, Sophie's voice, small and broken, telling him about Clara and castles and princesses. She said Clara told her they had to go right now. She said Clara was crying. She said Clara told her to hide and not come out no matter what. He paused. "And there was the bear." "The bear?" "Sophie had a teddy bear, torn up, one eye missing. She was holding it like her life depended on it. She wouldn't let go of it for a second." Carter's posture changed, subtle but unmistakable. The alertness of a hunter who's just heard a twig snap. "A teddy bear." "Yeah, old, beat up, stuffing coming out of a tear in the seam." "Where is it now?" "Sophie had it when Vivian took her. She was holding it when they got on the helicopter." Carter was already typing on her tablet. Clara was a smart woman. She knew her apartment would be searched. She knew her devices would be seized. If she had evidence she needed to keep safe, truly safe, she'd hide it somewhere no one would think to look. Somewhere that would stay with Sophie no matter what happened. The realization hit Marcus and Carter at the same moment. Their eyes met. "The bear," Marcus said. If Clara embedded a drive, a micro SD card, a USB stick, anything small enough, in that stuffed animal, it would have traveled everywhere Sophie went. Clara didn't just save Sophie's life. She may have made Sophie the carrier of everything she'd gathered. Everything that could bring Ashford Dynamics down. "And now it's in Vivian's penthouse," Marcus said. "In Seattle. In a building you can see the water from." Carter closed her tablet. Her face was tight with something Marcus recognized. The expression of someone who just realized the clock was running, and they were behind. "If Vivian doesn't know about the bear, we have time," Carter said. "If she does, or if she figures it out, that evidence is gone forever." "So what do we do?" "We don't do anything, Mr. Delaney. I need to take this to my team. We need a warrant, a strategy. This has to be done by the book, or it won't hold up in court." "By the book," Marcus repeated. "And how long does that take?" "Days, maybe weeks. These aren't street criminals. Ashford Dynamics has the best legal team money can buy. One wrong step, and they'll have the whole case thrown out." "Sophie doesn't have weeks." "Sophie is safe with her mother." "Is she? Because 2 hours ago you told me her mother might be selling national security secrets to foreign governments. That doesn't sound safe to me." Carter stood. "Mr. Delaney, I understand your concern. I share it. But I need you to stay out of this. Don't contact Vivian. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anyone about what I told you today. Can you do that?" Marcus looked at her card in his hand. He looked at Harding, who'd sat through the entire conversation without saying a word, his face unreadable. He looked out the window at his truck in the parking lot. The same truck that had almost run over a little girl 4 nights ago. "I can do that," he said. "For now." Carter caught the qualifier. "Mr. Delaney, I said I'll stay out of it. And I will, as long as Sophie is safe. But if something happens to that girl, if even a hint of something happens to that girl, I don't care how many lawyers, or security guards, or federal protocol stand between us. I will not sit still." Carter studied him the way she probably studied suspects, reading the micro-expressions, the body language, the things people revealed when they thought they were hiding. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she nodded. "Fair enough. Just remember, Clara tried to be a hero too." She left. The door closed behind her, and the office felt smaller, like the walls had shifted inward while they were talking. Harding finally spoke. "That was a lot to take in." "Yeah. What are you going to do?" Marcus put Carter's card in his wallet. It sat next to Vivian's card. 2 women on opposite sides of something he was standing directly in the middle of. "I'm going to go pick up my son," Marcus said. "I'm going to take him home. I'm going to make him dinner and help him with his homework and read him a story before bed. And then I'm going to sit on my porch and figure out how a man who fixes cars for $19 an hour is supposed to protect a little girl who lives 600 miles away in a tower he'll never set foot in." Harding nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, Delaney, you did the right thing, stopping that truck, staying with that girl, speaking up when it would have been easier to keep your mouth shut. Not everyone would have done that." Marcus looked at the couch where Sophie had slept, where she'd held his hand, where she'd asked him if he'd see her again, and he'd said, maybe, because the truth, "Probably not, sweetheart, because I'm nobody, and your mother is worth $14 billion, and the world doesn't work the way it should," was too heavy for a 5-year-old to carry. "Doing the right thing is easy," Marcus said. "Living with it after is the hard part." He walked out of the sheriff's office and drove to Pine Ridge Elementary. Eli was waiting in the pickup line, backpack too big for his body, gap-toothed grin splitting his face the second he saw the truck. "Dad, guess what? I got 100 on my math test. 100! Marcus pulled him into a hug so tight Eli squirmed. "That's amazing, buddy. I'm so proud of you." "Dad, you're squishing me." "Sorry." Marcus let go. But not all the way. He kept one hand on Eli's shoulder as they walked to the truck, kept him close, kept him within arm's reach. Because somewhere out there, a woman had lost everything trying to keep a child safe. And somewhere else, another woman had arrived in a helicopter and taken that child back into a world that might be the most dangerous place of all. And Marcus Delaney was standing between those two truths, with nothing but a mechanic's salary, a veteran's instincts, and a love for his son so fierce it could burn a hole through steel. He buckled Eli in, started the truck, pulled out of the parking lot. "Dad," Eli said, "can we get ice cream?" Marcus looked at his son in the rearview mirror. 7 years old, alive, safe, here. "Yeah, buddy," he said. "Ice cream sounds perfect." They drove to the shop on Main Street, and Marcus bought 2 scoops of chocolate in a waffle cone for Eli, and sat at the little table by the window and watched his son eat and laugh and get ice cream on his nose. And for 30 minutes, the world was exactly as it should be. But in his wallet, 2 cards sat side by side. And in Seattle, a teddy bear with one eye and a torn seam sat in a penthouse apartment, holding secrets that could topple an empire or bury them all. 2 weeks crawled by. Marcus tried to put it behind him, tried to go back to the life he'd built, the small, careful, deliberate life of a single father in a town nobody had heard of. Wake up at 6, make breakfast, pack Eli's lunch, drop him at school, clock in at Miller's, fix engines, pick Eli up at 3. Homework, dinner, bath, story, bed. Repeat. But the routine that had once felt like solid ground now felt like a thin floor over a deep hole. Every time Marcus turned a wrench, his mind went somewhere else. Every time his phone rang, he flinched. Every time a car he didn't recognize drove down Ridgewater Road, he moved to the window and watched until it passed. He checked the news obsessively, searched Vivian Ashford's name every night after Eli went to sleep, scrolling through articles on his cracked phone screen in the dark of his bedroom. Ashford Dynamics stock was up 11%. Vivian had given a keynote at a cybersecurity conference in D.C. The company had just landed a new contract with the Department of Defense. Everything looked clean. Everything looked normal. The machine kept running like no one had ever tried to throw a wrench into it. There was nothing about Clara Whitfield, nothing about a dead nanny or a whistleblower or a little girl found barefoot on a highway. Clara's death had been swallowed whole, a footnote in a story that the world had already moved past. Marcus called Agent Carter once, just to check in, just to ask if there was progress. "These things take time, Mr. Delaney," Carter said. Her voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone choosing every word like it was a step through a minefield. "We're building the case, but Ashford's legal team is aggressive. Every warrant we request gets challenged. Every subpoena gets buried in motions." "And the bear?" A pause, just long enough to mean something. "We're working on it." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have right now. Stay patient. Stay quiet. I'll contact you when there's something to share." She hung up. And Marcus sat on his porch in the dark with a beer he didn't drink, staring at the road and wondering if patience was just another word for letting the bad guys win. Eli could tell something was wrong. Kids always could. They didn't have the vocabulary for it, but they had the radar. He'd catch Marcus staring out the window and ask, "What are you looking at, Dad?" He'd notice Marcus checking the locks twice before bed and say, "Are you scared of something?" He'd crawl into Marcus's lap on the couch for no reason and just sit there, as if his presence alone could fix whatever was broken. One night, while Marcus was tucking him in, Eli asked, "Dad, are you sad?" Marcus smoothed the blanket over his son's chest. "Why would you think that? You have your sad face on, the one you get when you look at Mommy's picture." Marcus's throat tightened. He kept a framed photo of Denise on the bookshelf in the living room. Eli was right. Marcus had been staring at it more lately. Not because he was thinking about Denise, but because he was thinking about what she'd say if she were here. What she'd tell him to do about Sophie and Vivian and all of it. Denise would have said, "Do the right thing." She always did. Even when it cost her. Even when it was hard. That was the thing about Denise. She believed in goodness the way some people believed in gravity. It was just there. You didn't have to explain it or justify it. You just had to live it. "I'm not sad, buddy," Marcus said. "I'm just thinking about stuff." "Grown-up stuff?" "Yeah, grown-up stuff." "Is it about the little girl?" Marcus went still. "What little girl?" "Mrs. Henderson told me you found a little girl in the snow. She said you saved her life. Is that true?" Marcus was going to have a talk with Mrs. Henderson about keeping secrets. "Yeah, buddy. That's true." "Is she okay?" "She's okay." "What's her name?" "Sophie." "That's a pretty name." Eli yawned. "You're a hero, Dad." "I'm not a hero, Eli. I'm just a guy who stopped his truck." "That's what heroes do," Eli said. And then he was asleep, just like that, the way only children could fall asleep, between one breath and the next, like crossing a threshold. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, watching his son breathe. The next afternoon changed everything. Marcus was in the school pickup line at 3:10, truck idling, window down, waiting for the bell. Pine Ridge Elementary let out at 3:15 sharp. He knew the routine down to the second. He was watching the front doors when a black SUV pulled up alongside his truck. Not a Pine Ridge vehicle, not even a Montana vehicle. The kind of SUV you saw in presidential motorcades or corporate convoys. Tinted windows so dark you couldn't see through them, chrome details, the quiet hum of an engine that cost more than Marcus's house. The rear window rolled down. Vivian Ashford looked out at him. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her. Put back together. Hairstyled, makeup precise, the armor fully rebuilt. She wore a dark coat over something expensive, earrings that caught the light. The CEO was back. The mother from the sheriff's office floor, the one who'd sobbed and shaken and clung to her daughter like a drowning woman, had been packed away somewhere deep inside. But her eyes gave her away. They always did. Tired. Wary. The eyes of someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks and might never sleep properly again. "Mr. Delaney," she said, "can we talk?" Marcus's hand moved reflexively to his phone. Carter's number was right there. One tap and he could have the FBI listening to every word. But the school doors were about to open. Eli would come running out any second. This wasn't the time or place for a federal operation. "How'd you find me?" Marcus asked. "I found your daughter in a blizzard at 2 in the morning, Mr. Delaney. Finding a public school at 3 in the afternoon isn't exactly a challenge." She didn't smile when she said it, but there was something in her voice. Dry, sharp, almost human. like she was used to being the smartest person in any room and had stopped apologizing for it a long time ago. The bell rang. Doors opened. Kids poured out. Eli came barreling down the steps, backpack bouncing, face lit up the way it always was at pickup. Like seeing Marcus was the best part of his day, every day, without fail.
Dad, guess what we did in science today?
Then Eli spotted the SUV and the woman in the window. He slowed down, but didn't stop. Eli had never met a stranger he didn't want to talk to. "Hi," he said, waving. "Cool car." Vivian smiled, and for a moment, just a moment, she looked like any other mother standing in a school parking lot. "Thank you, Eli. I'm Vivian. I'm a friend of your dad's."
We made volcanoes, Eli announced, with baking soda and vinegar. Mine was the biggest.
"That sounds amazing." Marcus put his hand on Eli's shoulder, gentle but firm. "Hey, buddy, hop in the truck for me. I need to talk to Vivienne for a minute." "Can I play on your phone?" "Sure." Eli climbed into the truck and was absorbed in a game within seconds. Marcus turned back to Vivienne, positioning himself so he could keep the truck in his peripheral vision. "5 minutes," he said. "Talk." Vivienne studied him for a moment. Then she opened the SUV door and stepped out. One of her security men started to follow, but she shook her head and he pulled the door shut. She stood on the sidewalk with Marcus, just the two of them, and for the first time since the sheriff's office, she looked something close to real. "How's Sophie?" Marcus asked.
Physically, she's healed. Her toes are fine, no lasting damage.
Vivienne paused.
Emotionally is another story. She has nightmares.
Every night. About the snow. About being alone. About Clara not coming back. Her therapist says it could take months, maybe years. "I'm sorry." She asks about you, constantly. "The man who found me." She wants to know if you're okay. She drew a picture of your truck. Something twisted in Marcus's chest. "Tell her I'm fine. Tell her I think about her too." Vivian nodded. For a few seconds, she just stood there, and Marcus could see the war happening behind her face. The mother fighting with the CEO. The woman fighting with the machine she'd built around herself. Then the machine won.
"Mr. Delaney, I know the FBI spoke with you. I know what they told you about Clara, about my company."
"I can't discuss an ongoing federal investigation."
"You don't have to. I already know what Agent Carter told you. I know exactly what narrative she's building. And I know it's wrong."
"Is it?" Vivian's jaw tightened.
Clara Whitfield was a troubled woman.
She had financial problems, gambling debts, credit card debt, a lifestyle she couldn't sustain on a nanny's salary. She became fixated on the idea that my company was involved in something criminal. It wasn't true, but she believed it. And that belief, that obsession, led her to make catastrophic decisions. Decisions like dying to protect your daughter? Decisions like taking my daughter in the middle of the night and driving her 600 miles into the wilderness. Decisions that traumatized a 5-year-old girl and resulted in Clara's own death at the hands of people she'd gotten involved with. People she owed money to. People who don't negotiate. Marcus listened. It was a clean story, smooth. Every piece fitted together like a machine, which is exactly what made him distrust it. Real life wasn't clean. Real life was messy and contradictory and full of pieces that didn't fit. "Who killed her?" Marcus asked. "The FBI is investigating." "That's not what I asked."
You said she owed money to dangerous people. Who are they?
"I don't know. That's the FBI's job."
You're worth $14 billion. You've got security that can find a mechanic at his kid's school in the middle of Montana. But you can't find the people who murdered the woman who took care of your daughter for 4 years? Vivian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. A stiffening, a recalculation. Be careful, Mr. Delaney. I've been careful my whole life. Careful didn't keep my wife alive. Careful doesn't keep anybody alive. The truth does. Vivian held his gaze for a long, dangerous moment. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out an envelope. Thick, cream-colored. The kind of envelope that held things that changed people's lives. I came here because I owe you a debt, she said. You saved Sophie's life. There's no dollar amount that equals that. But I want to try. She held out the envelope. $500,000. Use it for whatever you want. Eli's education, a new house, a fresh start somewhere warm. Marcus looked at the envelope. He didn't touch it. $500,000. He ran the math without meaning to. It was more than he'd earn in the next 12 years at the shop. It could pay off his mortgage. It could fund Eli's college. It could buy them out of the paycheck-to-paycheck existence that kept Marcus awake at night, counting bills on his fingers. $500,000. And all he had to do was take it. What do you want in return? He asked. Nothing. Nobody gives away $500,000 for nothing. Vivian lowered the envelope slightly. Discretion, that's all. The FBI is investigating claims that have no merit. Eventually, they'll realize that, and the case will close. When it does, I prefer that you didn't talk to reporters, didn't fuel conspiracies, didn't turn my daughter's trauma into content for people to consume. You're buying my silence. I'm compensating the man who saved my daughter's life and asking him, as a father, as a decent human being, to let a 5-year-old girl heal in peace without becoming a tabloid story. She was good. Marcus had to give her that. Every word was calibrated. Every argument was reasonable. She wasn't threatening him. She was appealing to the best parts of him, using his love for Eli as a mirror to make him see things her way. And the worst part was, she wasn't entirely wrong. Sophie didn't need to be a headline. Eli didn't need the chaos that came with going public. Marcus didn't need cameras on his lawn, or reporters digging through his military record, or strangers on the internet deciding he was either a hero or a fraud. The money was real. The reasoning was sound, and nobody would blame him for taking it. Nobody except Clara Whitfield, who was dead in the ground because she'd tried to do what was right. I don't want your money, Marcus said. Vivian blinked. It was small, involuntary, the reflex of a woman who is used to her offers being accepted. Mr. Delaney, I said no. May I ask why? Because a woman died for your daughter. She drove all night. She hid Sophie in the snow. She got back in that car and led the people chasing her away from a 5-year-old girl, knowing she was driving toward a bullet. And you're standing here telling me she was troubled? That she had debts? That she was obsessed? Marcus's voice was steady, but the heat underneath was building. Clara Whitfield gave everything she had, and you're trying to erase her. Vivian's face went blank. Not angry, blank. The expression of a woman retreating behind walls so thick nothing could penetrate them. You didn't know, Clara, she said quietly. I know she saved your daughter's life. I know Sophie loved her. I know Sophie said Clara cried when she told her to hide, not because she was scared for herself, but because she was scared of leaving Sophie alone. I know what that kind of love looks like. It looks like a woman who already knows she's going to die, but does the hard thing anyway because a child's life matters more than her own. And you think I don't understand that? I think you understand it better than anyone. I think that's what scares you. Vivian's breath caught, just barely.
a hitch so small most people would have missed it. But Marcus had spent years reading people under pressure, in interrogation rooms, in combat zones, in the quiet, desperate conversations of a marriage that had been too short and too good. "What do you want from me?" Vivian said. Her voice had changed, lower, rougher, the CEO polish wearing thin. "I want Sophie to be safe, not your version of safe, where safe means controlled, contained, managed. I mean safe, really safe. I want her to grow up in a house where the truth isn't something people trade away. I want her to know that Clara loved her, that Clara wasn't a criminal, that Clara was brave." "You're asking me to—" "I'm asking you to be the mother Clara believed you could be. Because Clara didn't just run from something, Vivienne. She also ran toward something. She ran toward the idea that Sophie deserved better. That's why she didn't just disappear on her own. She took Sophie because she believed, right or wrong, that Sophie wasn't safe with you. And that should terrify you more than any FBI investigation." The parking lot was emptying, parents and kids driving away. The ordinary world moving on around two people locked in a conversation that felt like it was happening on a different planet. Vivian stared at Marcus. Not with anger, not with contempt, with something he hadn't expected. Recognition. Like she was seeing something in him that reminded her of something she'd lost. "You have no idea what I've sacrificed for my daughter," she said. "No idea what I've done. What I've given up. The choices I've made that would break you if you knew." "Then tell me." "I can't." "Can't or won't?" "Both. And if you're as smart as I think you are, you'll understand why." Marcus looked at the envelope still in her hand. "Keep your money. I don't want it. I never will." Vivian tucked the envelope back into her coat. Her hand was shaking, just slightly, just enough for Marcus to notice. The armor had held, but barely. Whatever was underneath was pressing hard against the seams. "You're a rare man, Mr. Delaney," she said. "Principled. Clara would have liked you. She would have trusted you." "Did you?" "Did I what?" "Trust Clara." The question hung in the air between them like a held breath. Vivian looked away, toward the school, toward the American flag snapping in the wind, toward something Marcus couldn't see. "I trusted her with the most precious thing in my life," Vivian said. "And she kept her safe. Whatever else happened between us, whatever mistakes were made, she kept Sophie alive. I will never forget that." It was the most honest thing she'd said since stepping out of the SUV. Marcus could hear it in her voice. The crack beneath the control. The grief she kept locked in a room she wouldn't open. "Then honor it," Marcus said. "Don't let Clara be remembered as a criminal. Don't let the FBI close this case with her name on the wrong side of it. She deserves better. Sophie deserves to know the truth about the woman who saved her." Vivian turned back to him. Her eyes were wet, but no tears fell. She wouldn't allow it. Not here. Not in a parking lot with her security watching and her walls barely holding. "Goodbye, Mr. Delaney," she said. "Take care of your son. He's lucky to have you." "Vivian." She stopped, one hand on the SUV door. "Sophie drew you a castle once," Marcus said. "For your birthday. She said you put it on the fridge." Vivian's hand tightened on the door handle. Her knuckles went white. "Be the mother who keeps the drawings," Marcus said. "That's the one Sophie needs. Not the one in Forbes. Not the one with the lawyers and the helicopters. The one who does the voices when she reads bedtime stories. That one. That's enough." Vivian got into the SUV without another word. The door closed. The tinted window rolled up, and the vehicle pulled out of the parking lot and turned onto Main Street,
and disappeared. Marcus stood there until it was gone. Then he stood there a little longer, because his legs felt heavy and his chest felt tight, and he needed a minute before he could be Dad again. He got in the truck. Eli looked up from the phone. "Who is that lady, Dad?" "Someone I helped once." "Is she okay?" Marcus started the engine. "I don't know, buddy. I hope so." "She looked sad." "Yeah, she did." "Maybe she needs ice cream," Eli said with absolute conviction. "Ice cream fixes everything."
Marcus almost laughed. Almost. "You might be right about that. How about we go get some? 2 scoops? 2 scoops. Chocolate? Whatever you want." They drove to the shop on Main Street. Marcus bought Eli a double scoop and a waffle cone and sat at the little table by the window. Eli talked about volcanoes and dinosaurs and his friend Jackson, who could burp the alphabet. Normal things, beautiful things, the things that made a life. Marcus watched his son and thought about the envelope he'd turned down. $500,000. Enough to change everything. Enough to make Eli's life easier in 100 ways. And he'd said no. Denise would have been proud. He knew that. She would have grabbed his face with both hands and kissed him and said, "That's my Marcus. That's the man I married." And that mattered. That mattered more than the money. But late that night, after Eli was asleep and the house was quiet, Marcus sat on the porch with the cold Montana air on his face and wondered if pride was a luxury he could afford. He had a son to raise, bills to pay, a life that ran on $19 an hour and whatever side jobs he could pick up. He'd turned down enough money to solve every problem he had because a dead woman's honor mattered to him more than his own comfort. He pulled both cards from his wallet. Vivienne's. Carter's. He held one in each hand, like they were the 2 sides of a scale. On one side, money, silence, safety, the easy road. On the other, truth, risk, danger, the right road. Clara Whitfield had chosen the right road. It killed her. Marcus put both cards back in his wallet. He finished his beer. He went inside and checked on Eli, sleeping hard, mouth open, one arm hanging off the bed. Marcus tucked the arm back under the blanket and stood there for a long time, watching his son breathe. "I'm going to keep you safe," he whispered. "No matter what. That's a promise." He went to bed. Sleep came hard and late, and when it finally arrived, he dreamed of snow. A highway, a little girl who weighed nothing, and a teddy bear with one eye, sitting in a tower in Seattle, holding secrets that the whole world needed to hear. 6 months. That's how long Marcus carried it. 6 months of oil changes and brake jobs and transmission rebuilds. 6 months of packing Eli's lunch and checking his homework and reading the same Captain Underpants book until he could recite it with his eyes closed. 6 months of driving past the spot on Highway 87 where he'd found Sophie. That stretch of road that looked like any other stretch of road now that the snow was gone, but felt different every single time, like the asphalt itself remembered what had happened there. Spring came to Montana the way it always did, slow, stubborn, and then all at once. The snow pulled back from the fields like a retreating army. Green pushed through everywhere. The air changed. You could smell dirt again, real dirt, the kind that meant things were growing. Eli's jacket went from heavy to light to forgotten on the back seat of the truck. The days got longer. The world thawed. But some things stayed frozen. Marcus checked the news every day. He'd developed a ritual. Coffee, phone, search. Ashford Dynamics. Vivian Ashford. Clara Whitfield. He scrolled through results with the grim focus of a man reading dispatches from a war he couldn't fight. Ashford Dynamics was thriving. Stock up 23% since January. New contracts with 3 NATO governments. A partnership with the Department of Homeland Security that made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Vivian was everywhere.
Conferences, magazine covers, cable news panels. She smiled for cameras. She shook hands with senators.
She spoke about innovation and security and protecting the digital future. Nobody mentioned Clara Whitfield. Nobody mentioned a dead nanny or a 5-year-old found barefoot on a Montana highway, or a whistleblower who'd given her life trying to expose the truth. Clara had been erased, written out of the story like a character the audience wasn't supposed to remember. Then, in April, Agent Carter called. Marcus was on his lunch break at Miller's, eating a sandwich in his truck with the windows down. When he saw the caller ID, his chest tightened. "Mr. Delaney." "Agent Carter, I wanted to let you know personally, before you see it in the news. The investigation into Ashford Dynamics has been closed. Insufficient evidence." Marcus sat very still. The sandwich in his hand suddenly weighed 100 pounds. "What does that mean?" "It means we couldn't build a case. Clara's evidence, whatever she gathered, was never recovered. Without it, we had allegations from a deceased source and no corroboration." Ashford's legal team filed 17 motions in 8 weeks. Every warrant was challenged. Every subpoena was delayed. By the time we got access to anything, there was nothing left to find. "The bear," Marcus said. Carter was quiet for a moment. "We were never able to obtain a warrant for the stuffed animal. The judge ruled there was insufficient probable cause to seize a child's toy based on speculation." Speculation. That's the word the judge used. Marcus closed his eyes. He leaned his head back against the seat and let the Montana sun hit his face, and tried very hard not to put his fist through the windshield. "So that's it," he said. "Clara dies, the evidence disappears, Ashford walks, and everybody moves on. The case is closed, Mr. Delaney. Officially. That's all I can say." "And unofficially?" Another pause, longer this time. When Carter spoke again, her voice was different, lower, tighter, the professional veneer worn thin enough to see the person underneath. "Unofficially, I've been doing this job for 19 years. I've put away arms dealers, money launderers, human traffickers. I've built cases against people who thought they were untouchable. And in 19 years, I've never seen a case get shut down this fast, this clean, from this many directions at once. Someone didn't just fight this investigation, Mr. Delaney. Someone dismantled it, piece by piece, like they knew exactly where every nail was before we even started building." "Vivian, I can't say that. I have no proof. And without proof, I have nothing." "So Sophie just stays there, in that penthouse, with whatever the hell is going on around her." "Sophie is a minor child in the custody of her biological mother. A mother with no criminal record, no history of abuse, and $14 billion worth of legal insulation. Unless someone comes forward with new evidence, concrete, admissible evidence, there's nothing more I can do." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to drive to Seattle and kick down the door of that penthouse and carry Sophie out the way he'd carried her out of the snow. But he wasn't in Kandahar. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a mechanic in Montana with a son to raise and no weapon that worked against the kind of enemy Vivian Ashford represented. "I'm sorry," Carter said. And she meant it. He could hear it. The weight of every case she'd lost, every victim she couldn't save, every time the system she believed in had failed the people it was supposed to protect. "Yeah," Marcus said. "Me too." He hung up. He sat in his truck for a long time. Then he went back to work and finished the day and picked up Eli and made dinner and helped with spelling words and read 2 chapters of a book about a kid with a magic treehouse and tucked his son in and kissed his forehead and said, "I love you, buddy." And Eli said, "Love you too, Dad." And Marcus went to the kitchen and stood at the sink with both hands on the counter and his head down, and didn't move for 10 minutes. He'd failed. That's what it felt like. He'd found a little girl in a blizzard and saved her life and tried to do the right thing. And in the end, none of it mattered, because the people with money wrote the rules, and the people without money lived inside them. Clara Whitfield was dead. The investigation was closed. And Sophie Ashford was in Seattle, 600 miles and $14 billion away from the man who'd promised her everything would be okay. The weeks after that were the hardest Marcus had faced since Denise died. Not because anything dramatic happened. Nothing did. That was the problem. Nothing happened. Life just continued. The world spun. The bills came. The trucks needed fixing. Eli needed feeding. And somewhere in the back of Marcus's mind, a 5-year-old girl's voice kept asking, "Will I see you again?" And he kept hearing his own answer, "Maybe," and hating himself for it. He thought about calling Vivienne. He still had her card. He'd pull it out of his wallet sometimes, late at night, and stare at the number. What would he say? Is Sophie okay? Is she having nightmares? Does she still draw castles? Did you ever find out who killed Clara, or did you already know? He never called. What was the point? Vivienne had won. The case was closed. Clara was buried. The bear, if it held what Carter thought it held, was either destroyed or locked in a safe that no warrant would ever open. Marcus put the card away. He went to work. He raised his son. He kept going. May arrived. Eli's school had a field day. Relay races, sack hops, water balloon fights. Marcus took the morning off to watch. He stood along the fence with the other parents, clapping and cheering as Eli ran the 50-yard dash with the kind of furious, uncoordinated energy that only 7-year-olds possessed. Eli came in third. He didn't care. He ran to Marcus with his ribbon and said, "Dad, I almost won." And Marcus hoisted him onto his shoulders and said, "You did win, buddy. You were out there." That afternoon, sitting in the bleachers while Eli played with his friends on the field, Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not resolution, not peace. Something quieter than that. Acceptance, maybe. The understanding that you couldn't save everyone. That sometimes you did your best and it wasn't enough, and you had to find a way to live with that. He'd saved Sophie's life. That was real. That was permanent. Whatever happened in Seattle, whatever Vivienne was or wasn't, Sophie was alive because Marcus Delaney had stopped his truck on a frozen highway at 2 a.m. Clara Whitfield had given her a chance, and Marcus had caught it. That mattered. It had to matter. Because if it didn't, then nothing did. He watched Eli run across the field, arms spread wide like an airplane, making engine noises with his mouth. 7 years old. Alive. Happy. Safe. That was enough. It had to be enough. Then, on a Saturday morning in late May, a package arrived. Marcus was in the driveway, changing the oil in his truck, when the mail carrier pulled up. Regular delivery. Bills, a flyer for a pizza place, a catalog nobody had ordered, and a padded envelope. No return address, no name. Just Marcus's address written in careful, precise handwriting he didn't recognize. He wiped his hands on a rag and opened it. Inside was a drawing. Crayon on white paper, the kind of art that could only come from a child's hand. A castle with a tall tower, 2 stick figures standing in front, one big, one small. The big one was colored in brown. The small one had yellow hair. They were holding hands. In the corner, written in wobbly, careful letters, that must have taken enormous concentration for a 6-year-old. "Thank you for saving me. Love, Sophie." Marcus stood in his driveway and held that drawing, and something broke open inside him that he'd been holding together with wire and willpower for 6 months. His vision blurred, his throat locked. He pressed the paper to his chest like it was a living thing, and he stood there in the Montana morning and let the tears come. Because there was nobody watching, and because sometimes that's what you had to do. You had to let it out, or it would eat you alive. When he could see again, he looked back in the envelope. There was something else. A photograph. Sophie at a playground. Going down a slide, blonde hair flying behind her, mouth wide open, in a laugh so pure and unguarded it almost hurt to look at. She was wearing a red jacket and sneakers. Good sneakers, not bare feet, not blood. And her face was bright and alive, and full of the kind of joy that only existed when a child felt completely safe. Marcus turned the photo over. On the back, in elegant handwriting, adult handwriting, Vivian's handwriting, were 4 words. "She's healing, because of you." He read it 3 times. Then he read it again. And then he understood something he hadn't understood before. Vivian Ashford might be everything Clara feared. She might be a criminal, a liar, a woman who sold secrets and buried truth. She might be the villain of this story. Marcus didn't know. He might never know. But she was also a mother who'd sent a photograph of her daughter to a stranger in Montana. A mother who'd written "because of you" on the back of that photo, in her own hand. A mother who'd let Sophie draw a picture for the man who'd found her and had put it in an envelope and mailed it to a town she'd never visit again. That didn't erase anything. It didn't fix Clara. It didn't close the gap between justice and reality. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A signal from the other side. Marcus went inside and pinned the drawing on Eli's bedroom wall, right next to the school artwork and the family photos and the picture Eli had drawn of a T-Rex eating a birthday cake. Sophie's castle fit right in, like it belonged there, like it had always belonged there. Eli came in from the backyard, grass stains on his knees, dirt on his face, holding something cupped in both hands. "Dad! Dad, look! I caught a butterfly." Marcus looked. Eli's hands were pressed together, fingers laced, a tiny gap between his thumbs where Marcus could see the flutter of orange and black wings. "It's a monarch," Marcus said. "They migrate thousands of miles, all the way to Mexico and back." "Whoa, that's far." Eli peered through the gap in his hands, fascinated. "Can I keep it?" Marcus knelt down so he was at Eli's level. Eye to eye. Father to son. The most important conversation either of them would have today, even though Eli didn't know it. "Butterflies need to be free, buddy. You keep it trapped in your hands and it'll die. But if you let it go, it might come back. Might land right on your shoulder when you least expect it." Eli considered this. Really considered it. With the gravity and seriousness that only a 7-year-old could bring to a decision about a butterfly. His brow furrowed. His lips pressed together. The internal debate played out across his face like a movie. Then he opened his hands. The monarch sat on his palm for a moment, wings trembling, catching its breath. Then it lifted off, slow at first, uncertain, as if it couldn't quite believe it was free. Then faster, higher. It caught a current of warm air and spiraled up into the blue Montana sky, getting smaller and smaller until it was just a speck. And then it was gone. "Will it really come back?" Eli asked. Marcus watched the empty sky where the butterfly had been. He thought about Sophie in her tower in Seattle. He thought about Clara in the cold ground. He thought about Vivian, whoever she really was, writing 4 words on the back of a photograph. He thought about the night on Highway 87, The snow, the blood, the small body in his arms. The 5 words that had changed everything. "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But at least it's free to try, and that's what matters. That's always what matters." Eli nodded, satisfied. Then his face brightened with the instant emotional recovery that was the greatest superpower of childhood.
"Dad, can we make pancakes?"
Marcus smiled. "Yeah, buddy. Pancakes sound perfect." They went inside together. Marcus got out the mixing bowl and the flour and the eggs. Eli dragged a chair to the counter and stood on it so he could help. He cracked an egg and half the shell fell into the batter, same as always. "Oops," Eli said. "It's fine," Marcus said. "Adds character." They mixed and poured and flipped. Eli burned one and declared it his favorite. They ate at the kitchen table with syrup running down their chins, and the morning sun coming through the window, and Sophie's drawing on the wall in the next room. A castle with a tower and 2 figures holding hands. After breakfast, Eli went back outside to look for more butterflies. Marcus washed the dishes and stood at the kitchen window, watching his son zigzag across the yard with his arms out, chasing something only he could see. Marcus thought about what Harding had said that night in the sheriff's office. "You did a good thing. A real good thing." He thought about what Carter had said. "You gave her a chance." He thought about what Vivian had said in the school parking lot. "You're a rare man, Mr. Delaney." And he thought about what Eli had said, half asleep with his eyes already closing. "That's what heroes do, Dad." Marcus didn't feel like a hero. Heroes saved the day. Heroes got the girl. Heroes brought the bad guys to justice and made the world right. Marcus hadn't done any of that. The bad guys were still out there. The world was still broken. Clara was still dead. Sophie was still 600 miles away. And Marcus was still a mechanic, making $19 an hour in a town most people couldn't find on a map. But he'd stopped his truck. That night on Highway 87, when the snow was so thick he could barely see the road. When every rational thought said, "Keep driving, it's nothing, you're seeing things." He'd stopped. He'd gotten out. He'd run through the storm and picked up a child who was dying. And he'd held her and talked to her and kept her alive and stayed by her side until he knew she was safe. And when the money came, he'd said no. When the pressure came, he'd pushed back. When the world told him to mind his own business, to stay in his lane, to accept that some fights weren't meant for men like him, he'd refused. Not with guns or money or power. With something older than that, something simpler. He'd refused with the truth. With the stubborn, bone-deep belief that a dead woman's honor mattered, that a child's safety mattered, that doing the right thing mattered even when, especially when, it cost you everything and changed nothing. Clara Whitfield would never get a monument. Her name would never make the history books. The world would remember her as a kidnapper, a troubled woman, a footnote in a story about a billionaire's daughter. That was the official record. That was the version the lawyers and the FBI and the news cycle would leave behind. But Marcus knew the truth, and Sophie would know it too, someday, when she was old enough, when she was ready. She'd remember the woman who woke her in the dark and cried and drove through the night and said, "Hide, baby, don't come out, no matter what." She'd remember the arms that held her, and the voice that said, "I love you," and the choice, the impossible, irreversible choice, to drive toward death so a little girl could live. Sophie would carry that, the way Marcus carried Denise, the way Eli would carry Marcus, the way every person who'd ever been loved by someone brave carried the proof of that bravery inside them, like a flame that never went out. Marcus dried the last dish and put it away. He hung the towel on the hook by the stove. He looked out the window at his son, who was now lying on his back in the grass, staring up at the sky, probably having a conversation with the clouds. And for the first time in 6 months, Marcus Delaney felt something he hadn't felt since the night he'd found a little girl in the snow. Peace. Not the kind that meant everything was resolved. Not the kind that meant the questions were answered, or the danger was gone, or the story was over. The kind that came from knowing, deep in the place where it mattered, that you'd done what you could, that you'd given what you had, that when the moment came, the moment that tested who you really were, you hadn't flinched. He stepped outside. The Montana sun was warm on his face. The air smelled like grass and dirt and the first wildflowers of the season. Eli sat up when he heard the door. "Dad, did you know butterflies can taste with their feet?" "Where'd you learn that?" "Mrs. Patterson told us in science. She said butterflies land on stuff and they can taste it with their feet. Isn't that weird?" "That's pretty weird." "I wish I could taste with my feet. I'd walk on ice cream all day." Marcus laughed. A real laugh, the kind that started in his belly and came out before he could stop it. "You'd need a lot of ice cream." "I know. We'd need a swimming pool full of ice cream."
Can we get a swimming pool, Dad?
"We'll see."
That means no.
"It means we'll see." Eli flopped back onto the grass. Marcus sat down beside him. They lay there together, father and son, staring up at a sky so blue and so wide it felt like it went on forever. The clouds moved slow. The wind was warm. Somewhere in the yard, a butterfly landed on a flower and tasted it with its feet and took off again. Marcus closed his eyes. He felt the sun on his skin and the grass under his back, and his son's shoulder touching his. He let the world be quiet. He let himself rest. 600 miles away, in a tall building where you could see the water from the window, a little girl was drawing a castle. She drew it with crayons on white paper. The tower tall and straight, a princess standing at the top. And next to the castle, she drew a truck. An old truck, the kind her mind remembered from the worst and best night of her life. And next to the truck, she drew a man.
She colored him in carefully. She gave him a kind face. She gave him strong arms, the arms that had lifted her out of the snow when the world had left her for dead. And in the corner, in letters that were getting steadier every day, she wrote his name. Marcus. She pinned the drawing on her bedroom wall, right next to the window where you could see the water. And every morning when she woke up, and every night before she went to sleep, she looked at it. And she remembered. She remembered the snow. She remembered the cold. She remembered being so scared she couldn't breathe. And she remembered the man who stopped. The snow melts. Spring comes. The world keeps turning. And the people who choose to stop, who choose to help, to stay, to fight, to love, to sacrifice, to refuse what's easy in favor of what's right. Those people leave marks on this world that no amount of money can buy, and no amount of power can erase. Clara Whitfield left her mark. Marcus Delaney left his. And a little girl in Seattle, drawing castles with crayons, was proof that it mattered. Because a child lived who might have died. Because a man stopped his truck when the whole world drove past. Because sometimes that's all it takes. One person, one choice, one moment of courage in a storm that wants to swallow you whole. That is enough. That has always been enough. And that is how the story ends.
Not with justice, not with answers, not with everything tied up in a bow, but with a father and his son lying in the grass on a spring morning in Montana, watching butterflies taste the world with their feet, and knowing, deep down, in the place where it counts, that they did the right thing. And the right thing is never wasted. Not ever. Not once.